Kristen, sweetie, if you're listening, is everything okay? Because I woke up and as I was preparing to podcast, I discovered this bag of leftover popcorn from the movies last night, and there's only a few kernels in here. And I really just can't understand what would possess someone to save such a small portion of movie theater popcorn. You know, I mean, it's hard as a rock, and it wasn't that good to begin with. So what exactly is going on, Kristen? Please let us know. I am going to, of course, now taste it because I'm very curious, but I can't imagine it's any good. Prove me wrong, Kristen. Prove me wrong. Well, I got to tell you, it ain't bad. It ain't bad the next day. I don't think you got much butter or there wasn't much left, but I've had worse popcorn. Okay, so if you hadn't already guessed, today's episode is essentially going to be strictly recap. Actually, not so much recap, more reaction, because I saw Scream 7 last night in IMAX at the Southampton Playhouse, and I have a lot of thoughts. And not only that, but I just finished watching the season finale of The Traitors on Peacock. So I thought this week's episode would really just be my reaction to those two things in particular. And then I'm going to save my full recap of my trip to New York City for next week's episode because I need a lot more time to record that. And frankly, I don't have the time today. This week has been a complete whirlwind. I'll get to it in that episode where I share my trip to New York. But in the meantime, we've got plenty to talk about. So let's start with the Traitors. I don't know what Maura was tinking. I don't know if she was tinking. I don't know what she was doing in that castle, but she had the wool pulled over her eyes so heavily. Actually, not the wool. It was more the denim. She had those denim overalls wrapped around her face and she could not see or hear a thing. And by the way, spoiler alert. Let's make that very clear. This episode is going to contain a lot of spoilers. If you have not watched the season finale of The Traitors, and if you have not seen Scream 7 yet, please stop listening to this podcast. I am shocked for a few reasons. One, well, really the biggest, most shocking thing about the season finale of The Traitors was that they chose to do the final round table around the fire inside the castle this time. Normally they do it outside, like in the courtyard, and it's a lot more dramatic and it's a lot more like sweeping aerial shots and whatnot. This was really contained, and I'm assuming it was weather related. Like I assume it was pouring rain and they just could not shoot outside the castle on this particular night. So then maybe they shot the final scene with Rob on another day because it looked pretty clear that night. But it definitely lost some of the effect, you know, having them inside the round table room for this fireside moment. But aside from that, it was definitely one of the more dramatic finales because finally a traitor won. And I saw that coming from a mile away. And I just, like I said, I don't know how Maura did not know that Rob was a traitor. She was not tinkin'. She just wasn't tinkin'. Who was tinkin', really, was Tara Lipinski and Johnny Weir. And I give them a lot of credit. And I think it's sort of ironic that the whole time they claimed that they had no idea what they were doing. They couldn't figure out how they were still in this game. Viewers kept saying, oh my God, they're so dumb. Vote them out. They have no idea how to play this game. But yet they flew under the radar. They made it to the end. And at the end, they had it figured out. They knew that Eric and Rob were traitors. And the fact that they did not have the ability to sway Maura and convince her to vote with them so that the three of them could have won as faithfuls was sort of disappointing because I really would have loved to see Tara and Johnny win. I think that would have been really poetic, you know, to see two best friends win. And also, I have to wonder, you know, the fact that Johnny and Tara made it this far in this game all the way to the end, and that this season coincided with the Olympics, and they are commenting on all the figure skating. Now, NBC obviously airs the Olympics, and NBC Peacock owns and airs The Traitors. So you could assume that maybe the powers that be said Johnny and Tara have to make it to the very end because this is a golden opportunity to cross-promote The Traitors and the Olympics, you know, because people are going to be watching the Olympics, hearing Johnny and Tara, And if they are invested in Tara and Johnny as commentators, then they might then tune into the Traitors. So that's something that I am suspicious of. Like, did Johnny and Tara really earn their place in the finale, or did they make it to the end just because of the Olympics connection? But that set aside, I was very proud of how they played their game and very impressed that they really knew at the end who the Traitors were. And I am sure in hindsight, Mora is kicking herself into Tushy because she was duped by Rob. And I think Rob did play a great game, although I feel like as a viewer, it was very obvious that he was pulling the strings and he had traitor-esque behavior the whole time. So I don't know how no one figured him out. I really don't. And I don't feel bad for Eric. I think he should have saw that coming. In fact, I think it would have been a smart move for him to turn on Rob at some point. That is really, I think the strongest position in this game is starting as a faithful and then being recruited as a traitor and then flipping on that traitor at the end and winning it all. To me, that is like the best case scenario. So Eric, poor thing, he just let his loyalty and his sensitivity blind his gameplay judgment. And in the end, it cost him his life. Mora, on the other hand, I mean, her reaction when Rob said he was a traitor was priceless. At first, I thought she was going to start crying. Then I thought she might start screaming. I thought she was going to get very angry and belligerent. But no, she didn't. She stayed composed. And then I think after a few minutes, she realized, wow, okay, you know what? Well played. And I respect that. She had a good sense of humor, and she was a very, very good sport. And I'm very curious to watch the reunion just to see really what she thinks about the whole scenario at this point, you know, having watched it back and having had time to reflect on the experience, like what does she think? But I will say, I don't know why they dedicate so much of the final episode to the fucking challenge. I mean, this was brutal. You know, I fast forwarded through most of it, but it was definitely a lengthy challenge. And again, I posed this question on Instagram and I had a few people respond and say, no, actually a few former players, Danielle being one of them, say that no, the way that they shoot the show is they get up in the morning, they get all dolled up, they get all dressed up in their hair and makeup and their fabulous outfits. They go to breakfast and then they disrobe and they put on their athletic wear and presumably remove all of their makeup, put their hair up in a bun, put on a skull cap, and then they go out into the wilderness of Scotland and they play these challenges and they get all wet and muddy. And then they go back to the castle and they get back into the exact same outfit, the exact same hair, makeup, and accessories. And then they film the dinner scene and then the round table. I just find that impossible to believe, knowing what it takes to produce a show. And I just can't imagine that they would film those events in consecutive order, knowing that it would involve hair, makeup, and wardrobe twice. I don't know. It's just, in this episode in particular, like, look at Mora's makeup in the final episode. It is flawless. At breakfast, she's got that little newsboy cap on. She's got her turtleneck with the little brooch, and she's all, you know, dressed up to the nines. And then for the challenge, she's up in a fucking helicopter getting soaking wet. And then miraculously after the challenge, she looks identical to the way she looked at breakfast. And her makeup looked flawless again. So unless they're spending 3 hours in the morning getting ready and then 3 hours in the afternoon getting ready, I don't understand how they filmed this show. But hopefully I get to learn firsthand because yes, I have applied to be a contestant on the Traitors civilian version, and I'm hoping that I get selected. And if I do, oh baby, you better believe I'm going to talk about all the behind the scenes details. In closing, regarding the Traitors, I would just like to say that I am very, very shocked and disturbed to hear the claims made by Lisa Rinna about being roofied at the Abbey for the premiere party. Now, these are very, very serious allegations, folks. I don't know if you're aware, but essentially Lisa Rinna has claimed on the record that she was roofied at the premiere party, which was hosted at the Abbey, a very famous LGBTQIA plus bar in West Hollywood, I believe, somewhere in LA anyway. And not only does she claim that she was roofied, she is now exposing that this bar has a history, a reputation of drugging patrons. Now, that's extremely serious. And if it is the case, it sounds like it is the case because others have come forward. Like, they need to investigate and shut this bar. My phone is going off the hook right now. I got to throw my phone across the room. They need to investigate and shut this bar down because someone could get killed. I mean, especially if Lisa Rinna is telling the truth. I mean, I do think she is telling the truth. I don't think it's an if. I don't think she would make this up. She claims she had fentanyl and high levels of amphetamines in her system, and she was extremely disoriented and out of it at the premiere party, even though she had only had a few drinks. So clearly her behavior was alarming to some people, and she was, I guess, taken to the hospital, and she was treated by doctors, and they ran some tests and they found these substances in her system. I mean, Lisa, if that's the case, honey, you were not roofied. This was attempted murder. Like, fentanyl is deadly, even the smallest doses of it. So like I said, this is an extremely serious accusation, and it's an extremely serious offense. And if it is something that consistently happens at this bar, well, then it stands to reason that it's one of the employees or the bartenders that is responsible, right? I mean, the odds of a patron being there and doing this, unless that's just like, like, I don't know, this like whole conspiracy that if you're going to go party at the Abbey, you're going to try and drug one of the other club goers. I don't know. And by the way, this is all alleged. This is all my speculation, but it's really, really outrageous to think that this is possible. And I hope that they get to the bottom of it. And I'll have more about Lisa Rinna in my next episode, because you better believe I'm going to talk about the fact that we were both on the Tamron Hall show on the same day, and we had a little run-in backstage, okay? So now let's talk about Scream 7. So I had the privilege of seeing it last night in IMAX at the Southampton Playhouse, and I sort of co-hosted the screening along with Eric Cohn, the artistic director. So I was in full Ghostface attire. I had the whole costume on as people were arriving, and I created this little Guess the Ghostface trivia game. Not so much trivia. It was really more like a guessing game. We had a ballot that people had to figure out to try and guess who the Ghostface or Ghostfaces was, and the winner received a signed poster. Lo and behold, no one actually guessed the Ghostface, or all of them accurately, because the person who was one of the killers was not even listed as a character on IMDb. So how would I have even known to include their name on the potential suspect list? And we'll get to that. We'll get to the reveal of the killers in Scream 7. But first, let's talk a little bit more about the screening last night. So aside from the trivia and me being in costume, the other exciting element was that my cousin, Jimmy Tatro, who is a movie star, let's just say it like it is. He's a movie star. He started many, many years ago when he was probably a teenager, putting out these videos on YouTube. I think his moniker was Jimprov because it was improv comedy and it was all this outrageous shit. And I remember our whole family was watching along thinking, oh my God, this kid is hilarious, but he's a fucking nut job. What is he doing? And now to see what he's achieved in this industry is pretty remarkable. And we are all very, very proud of what he's accomplished, and we can't wait to see what happens next. Perhaps, a collaboration between he and I, join forces, second cousins taking over the world. His mother and my father are first cousins, and our grandfathers were brothers. My grandfather, Sam, and his grandfather, Jimmy. So we're both named after our grandfathers, and we're both comedians. I mean, what are the odds? No, I wouldn't even call myself a comedian. I don't know what the hell I am. I'm figuring it out as we go. But so he was in the new Scream 7 movie, and I don't want to... Actually, no, I do want to spoil it because that's what this episode is about. Spoiler alert. He is actually the opening scene kill in Scream 7, which is a tremendous, tremendous honor. I mean, you are now basically in the same category as the Drew Barrymores of the world, the Jada Pinkett Smiths of the world, the Liev Schreibers of the world, who else was killed in the opening scenes? Well, those are the big names, So you've got Drew, Jada, Liev, and Jimmy, the final four. But I think if you are going to have a smaller role in the Scream film and you are going to get killed, to be the first kill is iconic. He's the first image you see on screen, and the scenario surrounding his death is one of the better ones I have seen in the franchise, especially following Scream 6, which was just a disaster. It made absolutely no sense, and it was so anticlimactic and just felt like extremely disconnected from the rest of the franchise. I think they really redeemed themselves with Scream 7 and bringing it back to Stu Macher's house and making it about the self-referential film within the film theme. And it was the perfect length, because sometimes these opening scenes are so short that you don't even get a chance to invest in it, and they don't build the suspense and anticipation enough. That was the case with Scream 4. That was a disaster. But in this case, it really worked well, and the murders were brutal. I said to Jimmy, "Has your mom seen this yet? Because if I were in this film, my mom would be traumatized watching me get stabbed through the ear into my skull to the point where my eye is basically bulging out of my head." Yeah, that's how it happened. What a way to go. And then the poor girl, falling down from the balcony and then the whole house going up in flames. It was a scene to remember. And like I said, Jimmy, congratulations. I'm so excited to see where you go next. I mean, you're pretty high up there already. I mean, you're sort of reaching the pinnacle of certainly my career aspirations. So, go fuck yourself. No, just kidding. I will say it was cool to see so many comedic actors this time around in Scream. We had Jimmy, we had Joel McHale, we had that guy Timothy something from Veep. So these are all men known for their comedic performances, and they're playing these more dramatic roles. But that is what Scream is all about. It is a blend of horror and comedy like no other horror film franchise. So I was excited to see that explored this time around. Now, my reaction to the rest of the film is admittedly mixed. I left the theater feeling a little conflicted, if I'm being honest. I think I need to see it again. I think I need to process it again. There were things about it that I really loved, and then there were things about it that I really, really disliked, and I felt very, very confused by. So why don't we start with what I loved about it? I mean, I did love that we returned to Sydney Prescott being the main character, and that it was a story about Sydney and her family. And I loved the mother-daughter dynamic. I thought that Isabel May was fantastic. She's beautiful. Her acting was great, and it was very believable. I loved that element of it. I loved getting to see Sydney at this stage in her life and her domestic life with her husband. Of course, the character Mark, played by Joel McHale. If you know, you know. That was originally supposed to be played by Patrick Dempsey. I think that in Scream 3, we meet this character, this detective, Mark, played by Patrick Dempsey. And at the end of Scream 3, they end up together. And then in Scream 5, Gail references Mark to Sydney. They don't reveal who she's referring to, but the assumption was she's talking about that same detective Mark from Scream 3, who would have been Patrick Dempsey. And then when they decided to actually bring this character back to the screen in Scream 7, I assume Patrick Dempsey was not available. So they had to switch things up and make it a different actor and not the same character. But I am fairly certain that they originally intended for Mark to be Patrick Dempsey. But it was Joel McHale, and he was good. He was good. He survives. And I sort of thought that was a disappointment. Not that I want to see poor Sydney lose her husband, but it felt like there were no real stakes in this film. Like they only killed off the ancillary characters. No one with any significance died. And that has been the case in the last two movies, and that's a departure from the original model of Scream. Now, of course, I would never ever want or expect it to be Sidney or Gale. They are untouchable. You hear me, Kevin Williamson? Don't you dare. But certainly Sidney's husband is fair game. If Dewey Riley was fair game in Scream 5 and they brutally murdered him, if Randy was fair game in Scream 2, if, you know, who else? Who were like the biggest stakes murders? Like who? Well, Tatum in Scream 1, you know? I mean, the list goes on, or it doesn't, because I can only come up with 3 names. But essentially, I think they needed to kill off Mark, played by Joel McHale, if they intend to make an 8th film, because that would have been the momentum, the anger and the trauma that Sidney needs in the next film to keep fighting. Because now it does feel like it's just kind of plateaued a little bit. Like now it feels a little bit redundant. And don't get me wrong, I still love watching the movie and I will enjoy every single frame of the film no matter what. But I also can't help but feel like they're just recycling the same stories and themes over and over and over again. And now people referring to this as like the reboot the franchise needed. Well, this is the 3rd attempt now at a reboot. You know, you had the original 3 films in the 90s and early 2000s. Then it went away for a while. Then they brought it back with Scream 4, which is sort of the most aligned with this film because it centers around Sidney and her family. And of course, in that film, my dear friend Emma Roberts was the killer. One of my favorite ghost faces of all time. Why? Because it was really, really unexpected. Like you never, ever expected Sidney's cousin, Jill, to be the killer. And the fact that she killed her own mother and the fact that she was completely fucking psycho unhinged in that film was so entertaining to watch. Like I think Jill, I'm going to say it, guys. I loved, obviously, Billy and Stu in Scream 1, iconic, blah, blah, blah. Debbie Salt, played by Laurie Metcalf in Scream 2. And then Jill in Scream 4. Fuck yeah. Fuck yes. I also loved Amber in Scream 5. Fucking Academy Award winner Mikey Madison from Anora. Are you kidding me? To go from fucking playing Ghostface to winning an Oscar? Thank you, Rich Delia, casting director to The Stars. Rich Delia is a dear friend of mine, by the way. And the fact that he has yet to offer me even a walk-on role in one of the Scream films when he does the casting is something that he and I are going to discuss. And it's probably going to get hostile, but I hope that we will come out of that on the other side. And I hope that he keeps me in mind for Scream 8. Although I have to be honest, I don't know that they should make a Scream 8. Yup, I said it. I don't know where this franchise goes after Scream 7. But let me go back to, where was I? Oh my goodness, I've really lost my place. Emma Roberts, my dear friend. I don't remember. But essentially, you know, we have, God, I've really lost my train of thought here. Let me go back for a second. Oh, right. I was saying that this is their 3rd attempt to reboot the franchise, right? So then we had Scream 4, and then that was kind of panned by the critics, and that was Wes Craven's last film before he passed away. And then years and years later, they brought it back with Scream 5, and it was a new generation. It was, you know, the Melissa Barrera, Jenna Ortega story, and it was directed by the Radio Silence guys, and Kevin Williamson was not involved. Kevin Williamson being the writer of the first 3 films in the trilogy, and now the writer-director of Scream 7. Kevin Williamson, also famous from Dawson's Creek, I Know What You Did Last Summer, etc., etc. So Scream 5, I thought, really, really rejuvenated this franchise because it was a new world. It was back to Woodsboro. It was legacy characters in their prime. Like it was the shocking death of Dewey, which was and still is, I think, the most heartbreaking death in the entire franchise. And then it was the genius ending that brought Sidney and Gale back to the Mocker house and recreated these moments from Scream 1. Like, I really think Scream 5 fucking nailed the reboot. And then they shit the bed with Scream 6. You know, they lost Nev because they wouldn't fucking put their money where their mouth is. Shame on them. And then they took the story to New York City where it just felt so out of place. And it was like, what is this? Why are we at a bodega with Ghostface? Why are we on the subway with Ghostface? I mean, it was interesting visuals, but just felt so disconnected from like what this film and these characters are about. And then, they brought back Kirby, Hayden Panettiere, and then she survived. Like, if you're going to bring back Kirby, okay, you basically brought her back from the dead because for all we knew, she was killed off in Scream 4, but it turns out she survived. So bring her back in Scream 6, then fucking decapitate her. Do something, because otherwise, what's the point? Why is she surviving? You've got to raise the stakes by killing off at least one legacy character. Like they did in Scream 5, they killed the woman who made the lemon squares. I can't remember her name, the deputy. That was great. So Scream 6 really just, I think, set us back. And then there was all the controversy when Melissa Barrera got fired, and then Jenna Ortega left, and then Nev Campbell came back. And so then that leaves us with this third attempt to reboot the franchise. And it just felt like they were basically recycling some of the themes of Scream 5, right? By like taking us back to the Mocker house and making it really about the impact of the films on these characters, the films within the films, the Stab series, I mean. But it felt like it was just a little bit more shallow than Scream 5. Like it did not succeed as well as that film did, And then, to be honest, the reveal of the killers at the end, to me, was just the most disappointing, unsatisfying killer reveal in the entire franchise. Like, I couldn't even tell you the characters' names. I don't remember. And more importantly, it was the weakest motive of all time and the weakest connection to Sidney Prescott of all time. Actually, there seemingly was no connection, no personal connection to Sidney whatsoever. So here we are, the final moments of the film, right? And the entire film and the marketing has been positioned as burn it all down, your past comes back to haunt you, this, that, and the other. And they leaned in heavily to the possibility that Stu Macher was alive. We'll get there in a second. And then they reveal the final two killers to be this random worker from the psych ward and Sydney's neighbor. And like I said, I was trying to like follow the thread of what her motive was, and I couldn't. She's just some completely unhinged, deranged woman who was in an abusive relationship and then killed her husband and then read Sydney's book Out of Darkness, which helped her kind of recover from her time in darkness. But then she was angry at Sydney because Sydney disappeared from the public eye. So then she was determined to kill Sydney because of that. And in doing so, she then killed her own son. And she recruited these men from the psych ward that she admitted herself to. Like, what? What the fuck is this motive? And what is this weak ass connection to Sydney? It was so anticlimactic. And why did she even want or need to try and convince Sydney that it was Stu Macher? Like, what was her purpose there? And why did she kill my fucking cousin Jimmy Tatro at Stu Macher's house in the beginning? Like, what did that kill have to do with the rest of the film? I really don't understand. And I'm shocked. I really am shocked that Kevin Williamson would end the film that way. I'm still like trying to process it. I feel like I got like punked. Like, what? And you know what? I pegged that woman, Jessica, as the killer the second I saw her. Like, I knew she was suspicious and she was the same age as Sydney. So, based on the way that they've been marketing the film and the way that the killer is trying to, fool people into thinking he's Stu, that the connection has to go back to at least Sydney's generation. So I thought that woman maybe went to college with Sydney or knew her in high school or knew people in Woodsboro. Like when this all began, I thought maybe her and her son were a psychotic duo. I really did. That was who I put my money on, her and the son. I don't know. Like I said, the motive in these films has always been revenge. And I guess they thought that this fell into that category, I would disagree. So that was really my major takeaway. Like, I couldn't love the film because of that detail. But what I did love about it was I loved Gail Weathers and Courtney Cox and her re-entrance. I thought that was actually the best way for her to arrive in town, by driving down the street and fucking running over Ghostface and killing the first Ghostface halfway through the film, which was something we have never seen before. For Ghostface to be caught so early on in the film and for him to be unmasked was cool. I loved that, and I loved the fact that it was just Gail fucking flooring it into this motherfucker, running him over, and then parking and getting out of the car being like, I'm back, bitches. And I loved, of course, Chad and Mindy. I thought that whole relationship was a little far-fetched, but hey, everything in this film is far-fetched, right? I loved that Gail and Sydney really explored and developed their relationship more in this film. It felt like a really nice full circle moment for them, and it felt like closure for the first time ever in this franchise, where they have a moment where they acknowledge each other as two women who've experienced this for the last 30 years. And for that reason, I feel like it's a good place to end the franchise. For that reason alone, let's just preserve that, please. And then I really loved as well the investigation of it all. For the first time in a while, the film was focused on investigating who the killer was and the whodunit of it all and the murder mystery. It felt a little bit like Scream 3 in that sense, which I loved. That was one of my favorite films in the franchise. Controversial opinion. I was very shocked at how heavily the filmmakers leaned into the possibility of it being Stu Macher. I did not, I mean, we all heard those rumors and we knew that was going to be something that was addressed in the film. I did not think or realize that the entire plot was going to focus on the possibility of it being Stu Macher and the characters themselves being aware of this and actually investigating this. So I thought that was a really nice touch. I thought it was surprising that they took it that far. Like I said, I thought it was going to be like a mention here or there. I did not know that it was going to be the entire mystery. What else did I love? I loved that we got to see Gail be a little bit vulnerable for the first time, right? And that they acknowledged that she had gone through something extremely traumatic in Scream 6 in New York City. That was the most brutal attack that Gail has ever survived. The phone call in her penthouse, and then the chase, and then the stabbing. And now here we see her in Scream 7, and she's got some nerve damage, and that was heartbreaking to see because she's always tough as nails, so stoic, and you never see any weakness from Gail. And in this film, you finally see her crack just a little bit, and it was nice to see that human side of Gail Weathers. And then, for Sydney to notice that as well, to see her taking the painkillers, I think it just put everything that they had been through into perspective. And like I said, I love that the film does culminate with Gail and Sydney finally embracing each other. I like that the death scenes were brutal and creative. They weren't just, stabs. They were really kind of wild, especially the girl in the theater. That was pretty epic. And like I said, I have mixed feelings. I really do have mixed feelings, and I'm not alone. I think the critics, you could argue, are not so mixed. It seems like they are universally in agreement that this is the worst film in the franchise. I wouldn't go that far. I still think Scream 6 is worse, but I do think this is up there. I think they missed the mark in a lot of ways, but at the same time, there were some really great elements and details. So I'm going to give this a solid 6 out of 10. I'm not quite 50-50 on it. I'm leaning more towards I liked it because the things that I liked about it sort of outweigh the things that I didn't like about it. Let's see what Eric Cohn and the team from Southampton Playhouse had to say about it, because I just got their newsletter and they did a whole editorial piece about the fundamental comedy of Scream. So yeah, Eric Cohn says, through it all, Scream has maintained its primacy by holding tight to its formula. These movies don't just make fun of horror movies, they explore what makes them so compelling in the first place. And then he says this, which not only do I agree with, I I thank him profusely for articulating this and putting this in writing for other people to understand. It's important that Scream fans really recognize the importance of this character. He says, but the Scream movies have another resilient hero. The TV news anchor Gail Weathers, Courtney Cox, keeps milking the drama to advance her media career, turning herself into a central figure of the story in the process. By Scream 7, she's a comical figure, almost cartoonish and campy in her commitment to sensationalist journalism. Ultimately, Gail's showmanship embodies the essence of Scream more than the stone-faced Sydney. The history of Scream isn't so much about scaring the audience as transforming their fears into mass market entertainment. It's a punchline that still delivers 3 decades down the line. Wow. Wow, Eric. Thank you for your astute observation of Gail Weathers and her legacy. Well, folks, I think that this episode is now coming to an end, as it's going to take me an hour to edit it, and then I've got to post it, and I then have to go to work, and then I have to go to work again, and then I have to go into the city, and then I can't believe I'm about to say this. God, Jesus, take the wheel. I have to go to Palm Beach, Florida next week. That is the scariest realization of all. I have reached that stage in life where I have to go to Palm Beach for something. And stay tuned for my New York City extravaganza recap, and then eventually my Palm Beach 48-hour adventure. Ciao for now.